Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. I hope you are all well. Today I spoke with Ethan, and Ethan's written a book, and it's called Victim to Victor. And it's something I'm looking forward to finding out what it's all about. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. How are you, Ethan?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well, and glad that we've managed to connect as we had a little technical hitch. And it's nice to be able to see you, because when I was reading the bio that was sent to me, it was it's always interesting, because something that really stood out was a term that was used as victim to victor. What does that mean?
Like, if someone experiencing like adversities or hardship or something that's like real traumatic, and sometimes some people get too comfortable being a victim that they don't get out of that mentality. They start victimizing other people who didn't even hurt them, and some people don't reclaim their values, their self-worth, their dignity, and a sense of pride and awareness that you don't have to live like this, but you could do better. You could turn things around. It could become the better version of yourself. Victor means you experienced it, but you rise by being resilient, perseverance, and not gonna let it shape you for the rest of your life.
You just said something there that really caught my attention, largely because it's something that I suppose I've heard before, but I've never heard somebody speak about it. Is that sometimes being a victim is where you victimize somebody else that hasn't hurt you?
Yeah, it happens all the time. Like, for example, the Sandusky situation, that guy was hurting a lot of people that were innocent kids, but the kids never hurted him. Unfortunately for Sandusky, he probably got some demons that he hasn't faced. Even though he was married, had a pension, he didn't do the rehab on himself first.
So who's this gentleman that you're referring to?
He's the guy who was in charge at Penn State. That situation, I was just only using it as an example of hurt people hurt other people. And too often, when a person gets away with it, they feel like they can do it to anybody they want. But the problem is, eventually it comes back on you in the karma, and you leave a trail, whether it's electronically, physically. And he had a Christmas list full of people ready to testify against him. And then you get the FBI involved. And it affected thousands of people, to where Penn State football fans suffered. Penn State, the football program, suffered. They lost millions of dollars. They almost faced, the death ban, where their football program was going to be possibly extinct. But I'm only using that as an example of...
Yeah, it's just because I'm in the UK, so I don't always understand certain references, because I'm in England. So it's just,
Okay. I mean, one last example I could give you is, like, let's say somebody becomes a teen parent. The first time people might say that was a mistake. But if they keep having kids over and over again without the required marriage, you're hurting the children by creating a disadvantaged background. And then it creates this mentality here in the United States. Some women think they're entitled to certain benefits right off the bat, but yet they're not working on themselves from within. It's not until maybe 10, 20, or 30 years later, till after the fact, that they're emotionally damaged to the point where they're not as valuable in the dating market.
Yeah, no, that's something that obviously there's. I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name. There's a chap from the Roommates podcast, Azif, I think it was. I had him on the podcast a couple of years ago, and he kind of stepped away from that red pill kind of environment, because he was like, that's not what I'm trying to preach. I'm trying to preach about the values of Christianity, the values of the church, the values of marriage, the values of, you know, how we perform, how we behave. And there is this interest in going from what you were saying about dating and multiple children out of marriage with various different fathers. It is leaving a generation of children who are becoming adults, and they just don't know how to, for want of a better term, don't know how to adult. Don't know what's expected of them. They don't understand the value of why. Because sometimes when we can feel that expectations are unfair, but actually, there's another way of looking at it, is when people have expectations of you, that's a good thing, because they look at you as somebody that could be valuable to the community, and they want you to fulfill a lesson or fulfill a role in that community.
It does happen.
Sorry, I thought you were going to say. So what is the comeback story that's turned into success?
For me, it's me overcoming my near-death experience, where I had a 99% chance of death versus 1% chance of life. I ended up creating a book called The Inspirational Story of Ethan and Poetic, Chronicles of Adversities, Education, Sports, Relationships, and Resiliency. It's an autobiography where I talk about my experiences with growing up in a single-parent household, having a strange relationship with my father, the challenges of education, how sports and other people was like the gateway of me coping with life, and then how I had to overcome certain things that really challenged my fortitude to where I'm at the crossroad several times where I could have went either way.
So what was it that was life and death for you then? What happened?
Well, basically, the driver that was driving the car hit an 18-wheeler, and I was in it. And he died instantly. My aunt had several broken bones. She watched him take his last breath.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Then my cousin, who was behind my aunt on the far right side, he saw everything, but didn't experience no broken bones or injuries, just more of a mental thing. Then the little cousin in the middle, he died instantly.
That's hard.
And for me, I was the mathematical equation where I could have died instantly, but my aorta had severed due to the seatbelt. And I wasn't supposed to, live, but they still checked my pulse. They put the neck brace on me. They cut the car in half with the jaws of life, put me on a stretcher, and made this 30-minute ride to the nearest hospital where I should have died. But for some reason, take me to the hospital, even though it wasn't much of a chance left. And then from there, it just became a journey of a high-risk surgery. And then I woke up two times. One in a Cloud 9 state on that medicine. Then waking up with less medicine in me, where I wake up in the IC unit with IVs in both my veins. I lost over 70 pounds. My wrist was hurt. I couldn't eat or drink anything for several months. Then eventually I got put on a feeding tube, and that's when I was declared a walking living miracle.
How did you seem to have come out of this with a very positive attitude? Like, not just I'm lucky to be alive. I need to share those lessons. I need to share this perspective. What do you think enabled you to rather than sit there, because there's kind of two ways of looking at why me. There's why me, why is it all happening to me, and then there's why me and why is this my opportunity. How do you think what happened that you've turned this adversity into your opportunity?
A lot of things. I was on a lot of prayer lists. People were showing up to the hospital, rehab, and in my home visiting. And then there's a special anointing done. There's a special prayer to see if I can eat again. And then it was just a challenge of just, when I lay my head down, I had to use a towel underneath my mouth because my mouth was still drooling and I still couldn't be able to eat. Then it's just going to the hospital visits and then being homesick, only would. And then things got worse, later on in life with other things due to my parents' decision. It's like a situation where, people show up to the hospital and rehab on their best behaviors, but they're doing other things that are not healthy for me. And that's the journey of rehab where I'm learning how to walk again, talk again with sounding out the words. Then there's also struggling to pick up a bean bag off the floor while other people can pick up groceries with no problem.
Yeah.
And life was just so bleak that I wasn't sure what's going to happen because I never experienced this in my life. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But I did make the recovery mentally, physically, emotionally, One story I always tell people is like I got my MRI done on my brain. It had, some spots of blood. But the doctor just, looked at the car accident scene, looked at the MRI results, he brought his staff in and told him, look at me, look at this car accident, and look at this MRI. I don't suffer from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's something most people suffer from in the line of duty of military, firefighters, first responders, police, sometimes FBI, CIA, DEA, or even children in a high crime rate. Yeah, I don't remember the car accident at all. It took me like soul searching, looking at the article, looking at my Facebook wall where people saying they're praying for me and some other comments. Then to actually, look at the television footage was just like, whoa, that happened. What ended up happening was I ended up getting back going to college. And, life has a way of just pushing me outside my comfort zone. I thought I could just go to college, work this after school program, and just go about my life. But it didn't go down that way. It's just, you're a parent, I'm sure. If someone's working with your kids, whether it's a teacher or any person involved with the after school program, you're going to want to research that person because sometimes the human resources miss certain things. And what ended up happening was parents started researching me and they would show me on their cell phone, like, is that you from the car accident? I said, yeah, that was me, but yeah. And it just became a habit. And then my boss eventually told me I'm inspiration. I got to learn to deal with it. And I didn't feel comfortable talking about it because I wasn't ready to be vulnerable. And what other people saw on the other side was inspiration, triumph, a person who came back, and this is a working person. And then there's also, the scientific thing of I'm not addicted to any prescription medicines or any opioids. And eventually, later on, what encouraged me to write this book was this Greek family. And, keto man's hearts to his stomach, and they kept feeding me. When they did ask me to write my own autobiography, I came up with 4 different versions: hardcover, softcover, ebook, and the audio version. And it should make an impact in people's lives in juvenile facilities, professional developments, communities, schools, colleges, on the internet.
So when you're doing your talks, what is it you talk to people about? What is it the message that you're trying to give them?
The message I give them is like, this is what happened to me. This is something I experienced and suffer, and I'm not supposed to be here to tell you about it, but here I am. But also encourage people to, look at their own adversities and hardships that they're facing in their own lives. Like the difference between mine is I had to overcome death, rehab, and some extra stuff. All they got to do is change their mindset, change their environment, and do inventory on who they're really associating with. And there's also certain situations where somebody needs to hear something, allow them to feel encouraged to and do something different, because if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get what you're getting.
Do you, obviously, because you have a real depth of experience because it happened to you, and you're, regardless of how much people help you, no matter how much people will it on, you're actually the person that had to do it for yourself. Do you know what I mean? That there was all the goodwill and the good intention in the world that doesn't change anything, because you're the person that has to try and pick up that bean back, has to get that brain to function again. You have to have that will and desire to do it. Where did that come from?
I mean, I was just looking at life like it's not going to get any better if I don't have effort behind it. And then there's also, there's a time where one of the therapists just didn't want me selling on being in that wheelchair. Tell me up, up, up. Yeah. There was some a higher tone in that voice speaking. Then there's also them telling me, if I don't start working and making progress, they might have blood thinners if I don't start being able to walk at least 1/4 of a mile a day. And boy, man, I just remember the times of just being in that rehab place, just walking across, or just struggling to walk across the room, struggling to walk across a hallway, and my feeding tubes connected to me. And it was just, for me, it looked like a dark time. For other people, it looked like a promising time of the best is yet to come. And, I didn't see what other people saw, but people didn't see what I didn't see. Well, eventually, when you put in that time, a new mindset, eventually, you're going to cross the finish line and certain milestones. And, eventually I was able to walk on my own with less of a limp. And when I was able to eat again, no one could stop me. All of a sudden, I'm getting invited out to eat all the time. I see the waitress, but I don't see the bill. They were happy. People were going back with their lives. But eventually, as I talk about in the book, one of the chapters I talk about is homelessness, where, people just, my parents just weren't really supportive. It's like they would show up. But I realized in life, the same behaviors they're doing when I was an adult going through this situation, same behaviors they were doing when I was a child and teenager, which is not, putting aside their own differences, looking out for my best interests. And it's a sad situation where, they weren't happy with what I talked about the relationship in itself, about them in the book, but it's just the truth. Like, for example, my dad didn't like what was said about him being a strange father. But I told him, like, you weren't at one parent-teacher conference or IP meeting, and this is all documented, not me. And then for my mom, she didn't like how it was interpreted, but the reality is, like I told her, some of the things of my childhood, teenage years, we should have had this conversation during that time period when it happened. not sweeping under the rug, or be a situation of do what I say, but don't do what I do. But I'm going to talk this over with somebody else that lives outside the house, but I don't want to talk it over with you and not acknowledge your mental health and everything else. It unfortunately, I understand, some things are going to fall short, but you have to make things right with your children, because if you don't, when they become adults, they're not going to want to be around you as much, because that stuff still is sitting there, and it becomes a Great Wall of China, where it creates a barrier where you could be living in the same room, but still be distance apart from somebody.
What what tools do you recommend for people? Like, the thing that is still resonating is it's that transition from the situation, the scenario that anybody can be in, any adversity that somebody can be in. But it's recognizing that you do have a level of control, and that level of control comes from your mindset. How do you break that down? If somebody comes to you and said, look, this is what I'm going through in my life, how do you break that down for them to help them switch it to something positive?
Well, you have to want to do better for yourself on an individual level. It also goes back to how a person wants to cope with life. Do you want to go about the right way or the wrong way? The wrong way could be turn to drugs, alcohol. Some people say porn, but all you're really doing is watching somebody else be active, sexually active. And it creates a high. But when the high's done, you're back right back where you started. Or you can do it the right way, where you can express yourself in communicating, whether it's verbally, texting. And there's also Braille. There's also sign language. Or look at visuals. Or listen to somebody speak about their own experience. Because 2,000 years old, and most of the adversities and hardships we faced have already been defeated. So there is a blueprint on how to go from victim to victor. We have to want to do the work. And that's a problem sometimes, where a person doesn't want to have that humility to ask them for help, ask them for wisdom, or research them for things on their own. And far too often, parents are not encouraging their children to do better, because sometimes the parents who are adults have not take care of the things they need to take care of on an individual level. And, unfortunately, what happens, and then we wonder why there's so many people in rehab spending thousands and thousands of dollars. Well, the problem is, when you do get out of rehab, somebody's going to offer you a drink in this world.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to offer you some drugs. Somebody might offer you something that's addictive, or somebody might offer you some grace. Somebody might offer you an invitation to an event. Somebody might offer friendship. You have to choose, what you really want on planet Earth in this game of life, because it's never easy. Like, my suggestion, when it comes to me, instead of looking for the right one, be the right one.
When it came to... Sorry, carry on. Because you have to be willing to be ready when you are ready to receive that person. Because if you receive that person and you're not ready, it turns into a breakup and a lot of lessons learned. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of lessons learned in breakups. When it came to the process of writing the book, where did that start for you?
What'd you say?
When it came to the process of writing the book, where did that start for you?
It started after I got encouraged to write it with this Greek family. Spring of 2020. I just passed my college semester, and I started, writing. Got contacted by publishers. You know, I decided not to go with them because they said if I signed with them, it would turn my story into a movie with a music soundtrack, but they would have got majority of the lion's shares of the profits. And I just can't let someone do that to me.
Yeah.
Because what were these publishers without in the hospital, the rehab, and facing all this other stuff? I didn't receive no get well call from him. I understand this is business, but at least you could do is offer me at least offer me like a percentage of the movie because nobody can tell the story like I can.
Yeah, for sure.
And I end up becoming a self-published author where I maintain all my rights through the copyright. I invested in myself. I had a team of people for editors, a book cover designer, a professional pitcher. The Library of Congress finalized the copyrights of the hardcover, softcover, manuscript, and the audio version as well. And it was a journey, but I still came out on top because I was determined to do what it takes to finish the book. And I saw myself crossing the finish line.
But how did you?
And that's the key to.
Sorry, Karen.
That's the key to anything in life. You gotta see yourself finishing stuff in order to be successful in life.
But yeah, no, because it's always a minefield when you're dealing with publishers and stuff, especially with a story like yours that had publicity. But what was the actual process? How did you? I mean, did you dedicate an hour a day, 2 hours a day? Was it set day? How did you discipline yourself to sit down and actually write out the story, and how did it happen?
COVID happened, like I had all this alone time to myself. And I just wrote between the college break, wrote after I finished college assignments. I basically chose my own time when I wanted to write. And, just times where I pushed myself to ask myself, how far am I willing to go? Am I tapped out of ideas? Let me take a break, restart as far as on ideas, see what more I can draw out of myself. And eventually I did the work, and to the point where I was like, you know what, I've done enough. I've gone as far as I can. I'm ready to self-publish this book.
So, but when how did you decide what to include and what not to include?
It was a combination of just writing out my titles, receiving some feedback from people, and just go all in. And then I'm looking at other stories like the homeless to Harvard story, the blind side. Then there's the other story called The Pursuit of Happiness.
Yep.
How my story relates to those three things. And I just look at that as like those movies started as books. And then I saw myself in certain shoes of them. Like the homeless to Harvard story, okay. I may not went to Harvard, but I still went to community college in Millersville University. When I look at the Blind Side movie, I am a former student athlete, played football, track, and wrestling, and I had coaches that were educators who were willing to invest in me. And we have an involved relationship. And I saw myself in the Pursuit of Happiness movie where things were looking dark, things were full of uncertainty, but with persistence and having the right people on my team, eventually I became a success story. And eventually I created a success story in my autobiographies, all 4 versions of them. And it's one of the best decisions I made through encouragement through this Greek family. My book wasn't about, whether my parents are going to be happy about what I said. My book wasn't to be about whether someone hated on me or not. My book is about, showing something that happened in my life that I experienced from my childhood, teenage years, my adult years. And that shows a lot of vulnerability. And I also talk about other things that are much softer, which is my poetry. Thinking a lot of people along the life with investing into me, pouring into me. But I could have chose a different path.
Yeah.
I could have chose the drugs. I could have chose the alcoholism. I could have just not further my education, but instead I went against the grain. And I can say, well, me growing up in a single parent household of 5, I'm the only person who not only enrolled in college, not only graduated once, but graduated twice. And then when it comes to my other 3 siblings, we got the same dad with different moms. They 2 of them went to college before me, but didn't finish. Our younger brother did go to college, but once he got his certification, he didn't need to stay at Thaddeus Stevens, and he decided to drop out. As for me, I didn't receive any type of support from either one of my parents, and I crossed the finish line without them. I get asked often, you graduate from college twice, you're getting all these awards and accolades. Where are your parents? And all I could tell people all the time is that, some people just don't want to face things that need to be faced. And it's cool to learn, like, if you're not there to help a person overcome their struggles, there's no need to be there for, the success and enjoying the fruits of your labor. And it's not that I'm putting down somebody. It's just I've seen this happen in other people's lives. Like, you look at, certain movie people, actors, professional athletes. Their parents weren't there for them like they should have been. But unfortunately, life happens, and it's what you make of it. And I made a success story out of my life to the point where, kids understand my story on social media. There's been times where when I used to work inside the classrooms, a teacher might say, "I'm gonna get a cup of coffee. You can tell the kids about your story." And there's another time where I received an email from a teacher where she said, "Hey, I'd like you to tell this kids your story instead of me going on this reading and math lesson." And like I said, people researched me. And again, I thought I could, work, inside the school buildings and just focus on my life, but, life has a way of pushing me outside my comfort zone. Eventually, it resulted in kids asking for my autographs, taking pictures with me, and their parents finding out, and them telling a whole bunch of other parents who tell everybody else.
That's good. Just lastly, I'm conscious of time. I wanted to just cover some aspects of the power of prayer, because you've mentioned prayer a couple of times, and it's in the bio as well, and the book description about how the power of prayer helped you.
Yes, it did.
But what I mean by that is, I like to put some focus on, say somebody's never understood what prayer is, what it brings to them, how they go about it. For you, what is prayer?
Prayer is when you can speak to a higher calling, whether it's God, Allah, somebody, or supernatural, the supernatural world. And, it doesn't require you to be on your cell phone in front of a camera. You can pray anywhere you want in the world. It's just a matter of just taking that moment of making a request. For me, on an individual level, I learned prayer in church, prayer before the food, prayer for safe child mercies. For educators, they pray for patience and working in the classroom with kids who are more high energy or need more attention than usual. Then there's people praying as they work in corporate America, not to be micromanaged, discriminated, stonewalled. There's people praying, in ministry that they have, compassion for those that are less fortunate. I can go on and on about, what people are praying about and what they pray for.
What's the process of prayer for you? How do you actually pray? So if somebody come up to you and said, I've never prayed before, what should I do? How would you explain to them the process?
Well, for me on an individual level, I just close my eyes and pray. My hands together go like this. Or a person can just get on their knees and pray. Or they can write a prayer request to a church, send a prayer request to an email, send a prayer request to let's see, that is an email.
But do you sit in silence, or do you actually speak to God?
Yeah, it's just best to focus on the moment of what's going on at certain points in life. Sometimes you need to hit that reset button and just refocus, rejuvenate yourself mentally, physically, emotionally. So, certain things can trigger a person, but it's a matter of just understand what is it that was done or what wasn't done that had you triggered a certain way. And when we identify the trigger, that's when we start to regain value and control of our lives. So next time, that thing that used to be a trigger, it's just going to be a blank. And you regain control of that area of your life. Because there's always a work in progress. Like, example I give people is this. Let's say your car needs new brakes, an oil change, new headlights. It came in needing something, but when it leaves out of the mechanic shop, it leaves better than how it arrives. Similar to prayer, when you're praying for your needs and wants, eventually you'll become a better version of yourself than how you arrived in prayer. It's not always going to happen on your time. It happens in eventual time. And, when people were praying for me about my situation, they saw a brighter future ahead, even in the midst of in my near-death experience. And I'm here to tell people, the power of prayer works. It's proud prayer, was here before I was born. It's going to be here when it's time for me to leave this earth.
And that's a wonderful place to stop. Ethan, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it and enjoyed talking to you.
Hey, you're very welcome.
And that was Ethan. And what an amazing story. Truly overcoming everything life is thrown at him. And it's interesting. I always find it interesting when people are faced with such adversity, but just have such a remarkable outlook on life. So, as always, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing. And wherever you are from, whatever you believe, please take care and be blessed.